So the days of laying on a concrete floor or in the grass in the yard are over. Are you looking to install a car lift in your garage or shop? So am I. We're going to cover that in today's episode. So I've just cleaned this area out of my 30-foot wide shop and I've made some layouts. We're going to discuss a lot of details in this video. Plus we're going to put up a 2-post car lift ourselves, or at least we're going to attempt to. So out here, just delivered off of a semi, is my brand new 10,000-pound 2-post overhead car lift. And I got it from this company right here, TMG Industrial. They shipped it right to me. Here's the model number, and I'll put a link down in the description if you want to go check it out. It's the ALT100. Now get a good look at the size of this. You're going to have some way to offload. I was able to offload this with my tractor, drag it out, set it on the ground, and then come hook underneath and get it off the truck the rest of the way. Now let's go ahead and start having a quick discussion on this, and then we're going to do the full install and show you that as well. So if you take a look at my shop, I built this shop years ago and I set it up specifically for a lift. First of all, I'm 30 foot deep. That's very important. You could probably get away with a very common 24 foot deep shop, but in the manual to this, it recommends 12 foot of clearance in front of and behind the lift for adequate working room. And it ultimately depends on the length of the vehicles that you're going to be working with as well. Now I have extended cab and crew cab, large full-size trucks, so that's the length that I'm measuring off of. We also have small SUVs and other things I'll be servicing as well, but we ultimately want to go with the longest length that we have there. And the reason I went with a 2-post overhead car lift is because I needed to keep my floor nice and clear. So I keep my welding table off to the side over here. We still got a lot of rearranging to do, and I wanted to make sure I didn't get a 2-post car lift that has a floor plate, basically where the cable goes underneath the floor. I got one where it goes over top. By the way, make sure you have adequate room. It is 15 foot up to the rafters here in this building. I made for sure I ordered my building with 14-foot walls because I knew eventually I was going to be doing a lift. Make sure you have adequate room in front of wherever you're going to mount your post, and to the rear won't be a problem in my shop, and I have plenty of overhead clearance. The posts on this particular lift are 145 inches tall, or just over 12 feet. Again, I'm 15 feet up to here, so we're plenty good. The other thing you're going to keep in mind is your concrete. Can't have any cracks where you're going to mount the post, and it needs to be adequate thickness. Over 4 inches is what's called for in the manual at 3,000 PSI. You also do not want to have newly poured concrete. It needs to be cured for about a month as well. That's very important. Concrete gets stronger the longer the cure time it has. This was put in 5 or 6 years ago. We're good to go. I also tried to think ahead when I poured this slab. The majority of the slab's like 3.5 inches thick, but I knew I was going to put a lift in here, and I've got 4 foot by 4 foot pads poured beneath this. It was all a monolithic pour that are 1 foot deep and reinforced with rebar. So there's a 4 by 4 pad right here and over there. I even saved me a little drawing with all the measurements where those pads are poured. So I'm a foot thick in concrete in these areas where the posts are going. Plenty for what we're going to be doing today. All right, so we've got our first post in, and yes, I'm calling this DIY, but I have a tractor because I'm doing it by myself. But you do not have to have this type of equipment. It helps, and if you have it, by all means, use it. So this post weighs several hundred pounds by itself. By the way, they pack materials in there. I'm gonna take some of this stuff out to help with the weight, especially on the upper end. First quick look at it, I'm pleased. I wasn't really sure what to expect, this being my first lift. Everything looks nice and thick, robust, heavy duty. Like, I feel pretty comfortable looking at the thickness of all this type material right here. But if you're going to try to put this up without the assistance of a tractor or a piece of equipment, you better be prepared to have a few strong people to help you out. This is not a one-person job unless you have equipment. By the way, go pick you up some of these super cheap furniture dolly rollers. They're rated for really high weight. You can roll this around in your garage or shop. Very affordable. Harbor Freight and a few other places has those. That's a huge help when working by yourself. All right, so I have spent quite a while off camera laying out these posts, and we need to have a discussion about that because this is a critical step. Do not rush setting your post up. So first of all, we want them to be perfectly in line with each other. We don't want these posts twisted in or out unless you're getting a symmetrical lift or an asymmetrical lift. This is symmetrical lift, so these need to be perfectly in line or squared off with each other. Asymmetrical lifts will actually have posts rotated out. I'm assuming if you've made it this video, you've done picked out the type of lift you want. Typically when you're lifting heavier and longer type vehicles, you want a symmetrical lift where they're straight across from each other. Asymmetrical moves your center of gravity back, which is fine for small cars and SUVs and allows you to open the door and enter the vehicles even better. You don't necessarily want to start shifting center of gravity off of a lift when you're working on large trucks, diesel trucks and things such as that, although there's lifts that can absolutely handle that in the asymmetrical fashion. I went with a symmetrical lift because I'm mainly servicing big vehicles, tractors, and things such as that. So two things you can do. Look at the measurements in the book. It gives you all the layout, although be a little careful with them. I have found a couple of them that maybe not quite line up how I want. So here's outside post, inside post, all this stuff, and it shows you where the spacing, the heights, and all that good stuff will be. Here's the way I'm setting my lift up, and it's working out for me. This is the top bar since I got an overhead lift. Lines, pulleys, and stuff will be running through this. It has to bolt on the inside of the post. It's got this tab on this side, same thing on the other. That is 136 3/4 inches. So what I did is I came over here and leveled my post out after I got them relatively close to each other for what the manual says. So bubble level looks awesome. And I had to do that by sticking some shims under the back side. Those are just there temporary. That's not where they go. I plumbed that post up right there and made sure it was perfectly plumb. See where those bolts are way up there on the inside of the post? That's where this top bar bolts in. So I measured from the top and made sure it was 136 3/4 inches, which is exactly the width of this. And I only did that after I leveled my post. Long story short, what this allows me to do now is come and start drilling out my holes, and I know they're in the right location. I had a long, very straight piece of tube steel here, so this is how I squared each post up to itself. I put it on the bottom plate and good to go. The other thing that you can do is snap chalk lines. That's a really good thing to do. I didn't really want the chalk lines in my shop. They stay there forever, it seems like. But you could snap a straight chalk line after you measure it, say, off of a back wall of a shop, and snap them again this way on the back plate to really square your post up. This piece of steel worked out great for me, and I was able to measure from this out to the edge of the door. Same thing over here. So I made sure my lift is now squared up in the shop for whatever vehicle is entering. We don't want to get the holes set up all one way or another. And it's critical that your posts are perfectly squared off to each other so the lifting arms stay in the same contact points all the way up. We don't want no twisting, nothing crazy. I was happy to see, I didn't think it included the shims, but here's all the different shims that you can put under the post. This post is going to have to go that way by several degrees, so we're going to be shimming under this side after we drill out our holes. And as you can see, both posts had to be shimmed in only by 2 shims this direction. Again, those are temporary, so I could get nice and level on the post. So I'm happy to see they included those. I went out and bought a bunch of very expensive bolts, and turns out they include really nice anchor bolts in the kit. This is also why your concrete's got to be a certain thickness as well. Go ahead and give you all a little tip. May save you some aggravation down the road. I picked up a 3/4 inch concrete drill bit here. It's a Diablo. And this one with the red tip, the carbide tip, is made specifically for going through rebars. It's called a rebar cutter. I'm so happy they make these because I have got rebar everywhere in this concrete, especially in these big 4-foot by 4-foot pads that are down there. And it's just inevitable I'm going to wind up hitting it. And a standard concrete bit will not go through it. This one claims it will, and it really was not all that expensive. Okay, now that everything is squared up, we got the proper spacing. I've just measured against the manual inside post, we're dead on the money. Again, I've measured up top now that I know we're nice and plumb. We're going to be able to fit the bar in there. It's perfect. The plates are squared off with each other thanks to this tube steel. So I can go around now and start drilling all my holes. I know I'm in the right location and we're not ever going to have to move this. Now, something y'all need to know with these type anchors, it is critical that you clean out your drilled hole because there's a ton of concrete dust and powder down in that hole. And if you go to pound this in and the hole's filled up with that much concrete dust, it's going to sit on top of that and your anchor's not going to go down as far as it should or sit properly. So what I'm going to do is turn my vacuum on while I'm spraying some compressed air in the hole. Put you some eye protection on doing this. And as it sprays and comes up, it's going to go straight into the vacuum cleaner, but you always got to clean the holes out. All right, I think I'm going to go ahead and pound me one of these anchors in as I work around so stuff doesn't shift on me. But, you know, the vibration of the drill, I could wind up shifting this a little and I got it perfect. So I'm going to pound one of these in. I'm going to make sure that nut is all the way engaged on the threads. And we'll pound it down until it seats, but no further because don't forget we still have to shim this out and level everything up. All right, first bolt in, 11 more of those gigantic things to go. All right, so here's another situation to where two people would be beneficial. That top bar is quite heavy, and that's one reason I really like overhead lifts, because that bar is really a cable tray. Cables and hydraulic hoses are gonna run through that, but that bar also adds strength. When you put weight on these arms that are out here, these technically want to come in. That's why you have such heavy-duty floor bolts to keep that from happening, and I love the idea of a robust bar up there tying both posts together. Kind of takes away some of that deflection. That is a very heavy piece. You're gonna need a couple tall ladders and two people to put that in. Thankfully, the tractor helped me out again. Here's the key. Put that piece in after you've got all the perfect measurements that we talked about, matching up to inside the book. Go ahead and bolt that in. Leave all these bolts loose. You need to pull the top together. Now that we've done checked all of our measurements and everything's good, now we can come back and start taking these shims, leveling up our post, shimming whatever side we need, and we'll start tightening these bolts down. Do not use an impact on these bolts. The specs in the manual call for 110 foot-pounds up to 150, but we're gonna do this a little at a time. Checking level on the post, adding shims, tightening a little, working our way around. But the reason we do that now, not before that bar was put in, was because if we were to go ahead and tighten all this down and get our post maybe too far in, too far out, that top bar is not gonna fit. So put all that stuff in nice and loose, then shim everything and tighten down. All right, so let's have a discussion. We're fully torqued down now. We've got the top piece in, and I just put this safety bar in. This is a safety stop. It bolts in right there, and a bolt on the other side. Very simple, and it can only go one direction. You'll notice right up here, I put in a safety switch. You see the wire right there? That wire is gonna have to run up through here, go on top of the track, down through right there, and you see this hole right there? It's gonna go out along with another safety switch that I just wired in or hooked up right there with those two screws. Holes were already pre-drilled. You can see both of these switches are wired together. We're actually gonna have to cut them. So you're gonna have to make sure that you leave enough wire to run up through on top of the track, down, out this hole, and down to here. And what this safety switch does, if you raise a vehicle too high, the last thing you don't want to do is crush the roof of your vehicle in. So when it pushes up on this padded bar and trips that switch right there, well, the motor will stop. And I'm assuming this one in here is a second backup safety switch that touches the top of your carriage right there that raises up and down. So you're getting some redundancy. So what I'm going to do is take the motor that's included. It mounts to this bracket right here. Mount it because we're going to run these wires down and they go into here. They're going to be wired in to cut off the motor. So I'm saying all that because I've got to cut this wire. So if the motor's going to be up here, I'm probably going to cut the wire right here to make sure I've got enough length to that switch. And then that'll leave me a big long loop of this wire because we've got to run it over and down. I don't want to wind up with too short of a wire. So I'm going to get this mounted up here, very straightforward, and then we know the length to run our wires. When we come out this hole on the back side, the wires then run down this wire trough right here, straight out to the motor. All right, so another quick discussion to have. Before you even put your post up, while they're on the ground, you probably should slide this carriage up and make for sure the cable is around the pulley down there. Luckily mine are. Everything's installed from factory that way, but the manual said to verify that. So if you do it when the posts are up, you're just gonna have to have some kind of jack like this to lift it up to be able to look in there and work. But mine's already around the pulley from factory. Cables are rolled up in here. There'll be one on this side, and this cable is all the way over on the other side. So you just run up the post, over the pulley, across the top, back down, hang it over there, grab that cable over there, over the top of the pulley, back up top, over the top of that pulley, and then it's just dangling down there. So what these cables are going to do, they're going to go through this hole right here. After I let that other side back down, here's your working area where we can adjust a nut and put perfect amount of tension on these cables, and we're going to set them. So when one side raises, the other side raises exactly the same. That's very important. Otherwise, you can wind up tipping your vehicle off of the lift itself. So this is a must-to-do correctly step right here. Setting cable tension is setting each side exactly the same. So let me set this back down on the ground. I'm going to thread these cables through this hole right here, tension everything properly, and I'll show you what I did. All right, so let's have a further conversation. Very straightforward. The hose comes with it, connect to the side of the pump, goes down on the side here, and connects in to a fitting on this side of the post where the pump mounts. Everything's already connected on the other post. There's a curled up hydraulic hose right in here that I pulled out, ran up the back side. There's a little tab right there that it feeds through, one up top. It lays in the top tray. Same exact thing over here. It was curled up over here. I just ran it up this post, through the top, and connected them both together right in the middle. Very straightforward. No point in even showing that. They've already got the fittings installed and everything. Just connect these two hoses. So now whenever we fill our hydraulic unit and power it up, it'll pump through this single hose into the big cylinder that's in here, over the top into that same cylinder as well. So your hydraulic cylinders are ultimately what's doing your lifting. The cables is what keeps both of them lifting at the same time, keeps everything in order with each other. So let me show you what I had to do. I lifted both of these cradles up until I could engage. This is your safety catch. You lift it up high enough, you'll see an indentation to where you can flip this in, you can let the cradle back down, and it sits on your lock. Did the same thing over here. Lifted this one up with the jack, shoved the lock in, and let it back down on it. This again allows me to verify that my cable is around the little pulley right here, or the sheave it's called. And then up in top, the cable has to be, it's going to be so hard to see, locked in a slot up there. Mine was already done from factory that way, but it's worth verifying. I also noticed I had to kind of be lifted up on the first safety catch in order to be able to get the cable down in here and thread the nut on the bottom, tensioning these cables up on both sides. When I had these down, I just couldn't have the manpower. There's something about lifting them both up to this first safety catch that I was able to get these in, thread that 1-inch nut on, tighten it up, and make sure I take the tension out of the cables so they'll track together. We may have to adjust that further down the road. All right, now what I need to move into is we need both of these safety catches activating at the same time. Here's my handle on this side. By the way, it's bent. I accidentally did that with my tractor, and it's supposed to have a rubber right here. I'll knock that off. That's all on me. But you see these little pulleys right here? This nut right here, we're gonna wind up running a cable through here over that pulley. There is another pulley up in there that I'll show you. The cable's gonna go through the cable tray up top. Back over there's another one right there. It's gonna come down inside of this post, out right here, connect right there. See how the cable will go through there, and then we can pinch it with these nuts, and we're gonna tension this properly. So whenever we lift the cradle up with the motor over there, off of the catches, we can push one handle in over there, and both of these locks activate at the same exact time. This spring right here too is also supposed to be on the back side of this bar. Verify yours is that way, because you want it always pushing tension in on these locks, unless you're over there pushing the handle in, pulling these back out. But we need to get this spring over and around on that. All right, now that we're going to discuss electrical, here's where I need to tell you, if you are not comfortable or certified in electrical, hire an electrician for these steps right here. You want to make sure your lift is nice and safe. So if we pull off the push button power side of our electrical box here, you got your power control module on the inside, and here's our push button switch to send the lift up or down. Basically, this is a relay right here, and this push button clicks and tells the relay to click on and send power to the motor, or to click off whenever it's released. We need to break this output signal right here. Now refer to your manual. There's some wiring instructions in there, but you'll notice on this incoming side here, this black wire, this is our power in from power that we have yet to run. That's where we're getting power to the switch. On this side going to the power control module is our output side of the switch. So once you press this, an AC signal goes here, relay clicks on, and power goes out to the motor. We need to break into this with our two safety switches. So remember the wires that I showed you earlier and we had to cut? This is coming down from one limit switch, down from the other. I've got these stripped back, and all essentially we're doing is you send power in one side, it goes through the limit switch and comes out the other side. Don't get too caught up on the colors here. And if the switch is engaged, well, we break the loop of power coming down. But because we have two switches, we want to loop through both switches. So I'm going to connect two wires together here from the two different limit switches. So now essentially what happens when I send power in on this wire, it loops through one switch, comes back out, loops through another switch, comes back out. So if either switch is engaged and the connection is broken, well, we can't send power over to the control module, we can't operate the lift. All right, so I'm gonna cap off this loop wire to the safety stops or safety switches that we just made. Again, we're looping through both of them, in, out, really doesn't matter. It's just an open and closed switch. Now back to our push button switch here. Again, this is the side that's connected to power coming in. Black is your hot. We don't want to mess with that side. The output side of the switch, we're going to remove this wire right here, and we're going to hook up one blue wire to the switch, one blue wire to our relay here, or the power control module. So now the switch is getting power coming in, and then whenever we press it, it's going to send power back through the limit switches, both of them over to the control module, only if the limit switches are closed and not in the open or broken position, as in a vehicle's lifted all the way up and hitting our limit switch, our safety switch. Again, if none of this makes sense, please hire an electrician. Now what we're going to focus on is running some power over from our main breaker panel here in the shop. We're going to use a 10 gauge wire. and a 30 amp breaker. That should suffice for this particular system right here and the amperage it pulls. You'll notice we've got a green for ground, and because this is 220 volts, white and black both are going to be your hot. We've got 2 hots and a ground for 230 or 240 volts. All right, so if we take a look, I have just ran me a metal clad wire, so it's fully encapsulated all the way across my roof over to my main breaker panel to a 30 amp breaker. There is no power hooked up right now, so we're nice and safe to be handling this. Again, get you an electrician if you do not know how to do this. So I have a white wire, a black wire, and a green wire coming in from my cable, from my panel. And I have the same exact colors in here that's going to go to our little power control module. So it's very straightforward. I'm just going to hook the colors up correctly, and since I wired this to 220 volts over there, this is going to be a hot, this is going to be a hot, this is going to be a ground. This was 110 volts, which this is not. It's a 220 volt motor. This would be your neutral, that would be your hot and be your ground. Don't forget, we're hooking up to 220, 240 volts, whatever you want to call it here. And this will be our final electrical connections. Then we can fill up our reservoir here with our hydraulic fluid. By the way, it says either number 46 or number 32 hydraulic oil. I've got number 46. Very easy to find at places like Tractor Supply. We've got a max hash mark right there. It's hard to see. So we're going to fill it up somewhere in this range. And then we can start testing for leaks, make sure our power's on. We're going to go up and trip our limit switches and then try to jog power, make sure those are working correctly. We'll do all that before we ever put the last lifting hardware on and put a vehicle on this. All right, so we're in the home stretch now. I've done filled the pump up. By the way, you want to fill the fluid in the reservoir with the lifting carriage all the way on the ground. You'll press the button, you'll watch the fluid level drop. When it gets to the minimum mark, go ahead and fill it up again, and eventually you'll start seeing those cylinders lifting. Whenever you lift up, fluid's going to drop in the tank, and when you have these all the way down, you have got to be between the minimum, which is right here, and the maximum. As you can see, I'm dead in the middle. So it kind of purges the air of the system and gets everything going. And then I also went up and tripped my safety switches on either side to make sure that whenever I press this button right here, well, it wouldn't work. I'm going to show you how that's going to work with my Ranger right here, because it's got a roof that can go all the way up and touch this bar, and you will notice that I can no longer energize this circuit or this button right here whenever we're making contact. So all that's good. So as you can see, they can swing in and out of the way. Here's your lifting pads that it comes with. It also comes with a short extension, a long extension. You can use just the pad, or in my case, you can see I'm going to put the extensions all the way in. That gets you some extra lifting height, and because this is way off the ground, not like a car, this is perfectly fine. This is the shorter arm, which has to go toward the front lifting side. That is the longer arm. You can see they're different, 3-piece design, 2-piece design, but when they're folded up, this is the shorter one. So depending on which side you mount your motor on, how you drive in and out, the short arms go to the front side of your vehicle. I'm gonna make contact with the frame up under there, back over here. You go around, that's pretty self-explanatory. Set all your pads up to where they're making good contact with the frame. Now that we know everything is where we want it, let's go ahead and press this button. The lift will start coming up. Now you can see the vehicle is slowly coming up. Now I'm going to stop right here. This is what you really need to do with a vehicle. Now let's go check for balance, make sure nothing's tippy, front or rear. It's good to find out when you're only a few inches off of the ground. And we're going to start lifting this. And we're going to check. There's 2 ways you can check. Go ahead and raise your lift without a vehicle on it. Throw a level on each arm, make sure you're level. The other thing that I'm checking is these safety catches right here. Once we lift up, they'll come out and then they'll slam into a lock position, and then keep doing that over and over. There's lock positions every so often inside this lifting carriage, as I keep calling it, right here on the back side of this. If you hear one click in over there and then one click in over here, you know that you're not raising correctly. When you hear both safety catches slamming at the same time, which mine are doing, we know we're perfectly level. So watch this and listen. All right, they are both making the same sound at the exact same time, so I know we're lifting exactly the same. If for any reason they are not, that's when you're going to go in and adjust your cable on one side or the other, and this nut right here, and this is what equalizes them going across to each other with those cables that we tied in earlier. All right, now that we know the safety catches are in sync with each other, we can release some fluid by pressing this in, which lowers the lift, and we're basically lowering it down. See, it can't go any further. Now inside this groove in here, they're sitting on top of these safety catches, which are locked in now. And before you ever get underneath anything, you want to come around the other side and verify that this safety catch is in that indention in there, which it absolutely is. If you see this out, this side is not locked. Do not get under a vehicle. Now, in order to lower your vehicle all the way down, you have to press the button again. Now we just raised it up off of the safety catches, and we can press this arm all the way in, which will release the catch on both sides. And then you can let the fluid out and lower this down. One last very important step. After you raise and lower, especially a vehicle a few times, these posts are probably going to do some flexing, some moving. They're going to put strain on the bolt. Things are going to shift. That is natural. Go back and re-torque every single one of your bolts after you raise and lower a couple of times. I guarantee you're going to find some that's going to need to be re-torqued. All right, for those of you that were curious like me, how easy is it to drive in? No problem. Got this much room on both sides, and couldn't you get out of the door? I could. A little bit of a tight squeeze, but that's normal with two-post lifts like this with standard widths. Here's a tip for you. Leave your truck in neutral, pull forward, open your door all the way or back, and then if your truck is in neutral, you can actually push it back to where you want it over the lift itself. But even with my truck in park, I was able to open the door and get in and out. So that is absolutely worth noting right there. You can see you've got that much room. That's plenty for me. Now I've got my truck slightly centered about right here on the post. That seems to be about the proper center of gravity for a truck like this. The bed's really light. This is light. Again, we got more trucks sticking out this way than we do forward because we've got our big heavy engine and transmission and stuff all up here. Your vehicle is going to vary. So I'm underneath the proper lifting points of my truck. We're going to do the same thing that we did with the other vehicle. We're going to slightly lift it and test the balance here. So let's go. All right, I just made contact, so I want to first stop. Make sure my pads are where I want them. Rear has not made contact yet. By the way, you can adjust your different adapters there to accommodate for some of that, or just wait for the truck to lift up a little. Okay, truck is now just a few inches off of the ground, so I'm going to come around and check for balance, push on the bumper. Nothing seems crazy. So now I'm going to continue lifting. By the way, you can flip this entire lift around if you want your hydraulic pump and all on this side. I purposely did it this way, although a bit inconvenient because I didn't want the wiring over here. I didn't want the pump and all because this is my work area. So I just figured I'd get that stuff out of there. Just keep in mind, if you flip your lift around this way, you've got to move your arms, short arm to the front, long arm to the rear of the vehicle. All right, first heavy lift. Always a bit nerve-wracking. So I just made contact with the inside post limit switch. We're not even touching the top, but it's telling me this is as high as I can go. So we're going to come down on some safety latches. Let me double check that my other side's in. I don't want to walk under the vehicle. It's in, so let's go down on these safety latches. All right, the truck is now down. Locked in place, nice and safe. And again, before I get under there, I'm gonna double check my latches are in place. No pads, looking like they're getting ready to slip off. We've done checked the balance of the truck, we're good. So y'all, yeah, I got plenty of room. So for reference, I'm 5'10", even if I were up to 6 feet, over 6 feet, yeah, you could walk on here no problem. And actually up underneath, you could be well over 6 feet in the area where you're gonna be changing your oil. Sadly, I got a pretty good oil leak. I need to get that fixed. And just for reference, there is still 6+ inches from the cab to the bar up top. The reason that might be important for you is if you have one of these trucks with, say, a lift on it, especially a body lift, the frame's gonna stay where it's at, but the truck is now gonna go further with a lift. So you've still got plenty of room to play around with different types of setups of trucks. I was kind of thinking this was going to be lower than it is. It is not. Here's the other thing to keep in mind. I'm using the longer spacers, but I can stack these again with these spacers right here and get another, what's that, about 2.5, 2 3/4 inches, especially on my other truck that's four-wheel drive because the frame's higher off the ground. So I could go up that much further. Oh yeah, you could be well over 6 foot tall and working underneath this truck right now. I don't foresee anybody actually having an issue with this. All right, just for reference, here's the oil pan. Look at the headroom that I have. Hopefully it's not too dark. Still got that much room right here, and then up in this cavity, and easy working room. All right, y'all, hopefully you enjoyed this. This was, I'll admit, a heck of a project to attempt by myself, but thankfully with some equipment that I have, it's doable. I'm telling you, if you get you 2 to 3 strong friends, get together on a weekend, I really think you can knock this out in a day, other than maybe the electrical portion. This is gonna be such a blessing to have in the shop now with all the equipment that we have in service on the property. Plus, I've always done all of our own vehicle maintenance. Oh my goodness, yes. I no longer have to lay on a concrete floor or out in the grass. I get full service. Now we can do tire rotations, typical oil changes, all kinds of other stuff. Speaking of oil changes and all, I've got some specialty catch pans made just for lifts. We're going to be showing that off on our review channel. Links down in the description if you want to check that out. Speaking of down in the description, y'all, huge shout out and thank you to TMG Industrial for offering products like this. That's the company that I actually bought my specialty tractor skidding winch from. They don't just offer automotive lifts and things like this. They offer a little bit of everything, from tractor equipment to skid steer equipment to excavator equipment to automotive equipment. I mean, they just have absolutely everything. Go on their website. I discovered them a couple years ago when I was looking for my tractor skidding winch. They had the best price of anybody, so that's who I bought that from. It has been flawless and the experience has been great. They can ship stuff right to your place as long as you can offload it. That's been my experience with these couple of items that I've gotten from them. The process overall of ordering and delivering has been super simple. So link is down in the description. Go check them out. I'll also put a link to this direct lift if you want to check it out. Don't forget, y'all, when you're out shopping for lifts, you're going to be tempted to spend less on a non-certified lift out of thinner materials. So make for sure you're getting you something that is rated, certified, and well built. Thank y'all for watching. Hopefully you enjoyed it. We'll catch you on the next one.